Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, the podcast that connects you to federal technology leaders. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Our guest today is Anish Patel. He's the head of sales, federal and civilian, for a company called Cloudflare, Cloudflare. Anish, how are you?
Hey, John. Very nice to be here, and thanks for having this conversation with me today.
Yeah, I really don't have to, spell out Cloudflare. I mean, you guys have been around, since 2009. I think, generally speaking, I've done hundreds of interviews. I would guess most of the people I know have heard of Cloudflare. They have some vague idea, speed up their cloud somehow or other. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put the pressure on you. And what you're going to have to do is say, okay, so how can Cloudflare help our federal customers achieve goals? And maybe if you partner with other companies, what kind of partners do you want to connect with in order to help federal agencies reach their goals? And we were teasing before the interview began about the changes that are taking place in the federal government as we speak. And I would like to write down the changes, but I don't know if I wrote down the changes in the last half hour, I'd be all caught up. So what we're going to do is maybe frame this as, okay, we're going to learn about Cloudflare and how Cloudflare can help in a rapidly changing environment, and just let the listeners figure it all out from there. Okay, 2009. So what's the purpose of Cloudflare? Why did you even start in business?
Yeah. So, you did say that most of your audience here probably is familiar with Cloudflare, and that might be true. You'd be surprised at how many people I run into and are like, well, Cloudflare, what exactly is that? They don't really know what that means. So let's start with the most basic explanation. Say the most basic explanation is that Cloudflare, we make it safer for you to plug things into the internet. So that's very vague. Obviously, a lot of companies do things that connect to the internet, right? But let's connect this so that we're talking to a government audience here or federal forum. What are government agencies really trying to do? Well, ultimately, they need to deploy resilient, secure, cost-effective, whatever buzzwords, public services that users can trust. And so if you think about this kind of the last 30 years, maybe a little bit longer, really that public service has relied more and more on a secure and reliable use of an open and inherently untrusted internet, right? And so that's kind of the area where Cloudflare really fits in. A government system is serving information, sometimes public data that's just a website, or sometimes PII data, and they're delivering this to their users and constituents. That would generally be referred to as egress, right? We're egressing data from an origin that resides, whether it's in an on-prem data center back in the day, or maybe still today, public cloud, wherever it might be, back to wherever the end user is, anywhere in the world. So a lot of security policy today, it's really designed to ensure that that flow from that on-prem or that employee is monitored and controlled as it leaves the system. So think about things like zero trust network access and SSE and exfiltration solutions, right? All this stuff is focusing on the egress. There's another side of the equation when you talk about connectivity in the internet, because obviously, if you've plugged anything into the internet, the internet works in two directions. And so a citizen or a constituent is going to request that information from the agency service before it's delivered. And that's the ingress, right? Somebody coming into the agency to access that origin. And this is most commonly, but not always, but most commonly through like a web browser or a search engine, or today it's maybe an AI reference link, right? Accessing information in web apps, a form maybe. So beyond email and phishing, like this access of leveraging a web browser is probably the most wide open front door for attackers. Now, a lot of companies handle one route or the other, right? A lot of companies will say, hey, we're going to make sure that we can protect your egress traffic, or we're going to protect your employees going out. And a lot of companies will say, hey, we'll protect what's coming in. There's a handful of companies that do both. You could probably imagine who some of those are, just knowing that this is a tech audience. But most of the companies that do both make it easier for you to get your data into their platform than out of the platform. And so at Cloudflare, we believe a free and open internet is good for everyone. So if you've used services like 1.1.1.1, which is a DNS resolver that Cloudflare provides free to the world, or Cloudflare's free services just to shore up your basic security posture for your website, you'll quickly find that what we believe is that helping everybody improve internet connectivity is good for the community as a whole.
I was thinking about spelling the name in Cloudflare, and then it dawned on me. I think I bought a pair of shoes 6 months ago, and in order to go to the website or maybe go to the purchase page, there was like a little Cloudflare thing that popped up there. And it said, okay, so what is this? And then it was like a little, I don't know, it was like a little guard dog. It's okay. Okay, who are you? Okay, come on in. And so it was, you guys have 4,000 employees. I mean, the federal government's important for you, but you're involved in so many different areas of retail sales. I mean, identification. I mean, it's a lot bigger company than people realize.
Yeah, that's correct. From a size perspective, employee perspective, yeah, maybe not the largest company out there. But if you look at the reach that we have across the internet, based on some of the services that I just called out, you would be very surprised. So 20% of the entire internet runs through Cloudflare. And you say, well, is that a lot? There's a lot of large vendors that you're familiar with and the audience is familiar with. If you take a look at proxy services, right? Just public data on how many people are going through a proxy where a break and inspect is required. There's no other company, any big CSP that you think of, any big search provider, any type of service. There's no other company that does more than 2% of the entire internet. And so we are exponentially larger. We have an exponentially larger view of the internet than anybody else out there. And we did that because we have built a trust with the community, right? If your mission is to help build a better internet, the key word there is help. We're part of a larger ecosystem, whether you're a competitor of ours, whether you're a co-opetition, or whether you're just, part of some other ecosystem for our customers. The goal is that if we can, like the rising tide lifts all boats scenario, if we can make the basic security posture better for everybody, that means that more people would deliver and build new solutions that they can trust on the internet versus having to kind of stick and, pearl clutching to the way that it used to be, right? And so this dichotomy between what a modern tech stack can offer and what governments have to deliver, well, that's not lost on us. There's a lot of marketing out there from a lot of companies where you'll see, hey, just use our stuff and it will be the best customer experience that your customer's ever seen. Or it's the most secure environment you can ever see. Okay, well, that's great if you can refactor all of your workloads to run in the cloud. And if you could do that overnight, as opposed to the decades that it is obviously going to take, not to even account for the amount of money that it would cost. So knowing that people rely on these federal services every day, and the internet being critical to that, a lot of what Cloudflare does is try to find this like balance of how can we build a better internet, means like meeting you where you are in your journey, right? So agencies can provide more resilient connectivity, whether they were developed this year or developed decades ago. There's some value there to that functionality, and that's our premise here.
I don't know if you listen to podcasts, but one of my favorite podcasts is Dr. Zero Trust, and it's Chase. Everyone knows Chase Cunningham. He's really a good guy. And he hates VPNs. I think he's got like a T-shirt, death to VPN, or something like that. I would say in general, in the federal marketplace, we can see a transition away from VPNs. So let's set the stage for this. It worked. It was in a pinch in COVID. It's fine, but it had some serious weaknesses. And so if agencies are making a transition from VPNs to ZTA, so where do you guys fit in?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going to step back for a second and say, okay, so first, I at the start said, Cloudflare helps you connect to the internet in a safer way. That's very vague. So I'm going to say, before we get into zero trust, the services Cloudflare offers help with falls into basically three buckets: the customer experience that we talked about, employee experience, and developer experience. So when we think about the zero trust transition, predominantly we're in the networking and application pillars. There's observability and some of those things that, horizontally cross all the pillars. But generally, we are known for being a massive global network that gives you some level of ability to protect your customers, connect your customers, and build services in this very distributed and kind of a serverless way. And so that means that the place that you start using Cloudflare may be different than your peer agency, right? And historically, that has meant that, hey, we've been the front-facing engine of your website and making sure that someone doesn't DDoS it so that the site stays up. Over the last few years, it is started shifting to, what we started getting into the zero trust space in the COVID period. So we're relatively young in this space, but we have matured very quickly, and our offering can meet all the requirements that a typical government agency has. So how can we do this? How are we able to develop this so quickly in this zero trust kind of model, to your original question here? Well, part of it is that the way the Cloudflare platform was architected is to be a single platform. In the government, one of the biggest challenges you have with zero trust is that there's a lot of different solutions that can solve your one specific problem, whether it's replacing VPN or whether it's visibility into the cloud or whatever it might be. It's making all that stuff integrate together that's really the hard part, right? And so that's a process piece of it to some degree. And then more so than that, it's changing the culture so that the people and the process piece is the complexity. The technology is always going to iterate and improve. So tomorrow there's going to be something that's simpler and easier to use than today. But just changing it for the sake of changing doesn't solve something, right? And so when you talk about zero trust transition, how do we think about it? When we're out in the field and my team is out talking to federal customers, we say, how can we add security without impeding performance or compromising that security posture? And the best way to do this is to identify use cases where you can prioritize technology modernization that directly improves the customer experience, right? Well, again, like the VPN scenario, your original question, is really about employees being able to remotely access services that need to be on-prem. And that's a valiant effort and definitely something that Cloudflare can help with and does today for a large part of the government. There's also a portion of that. So for reference, we are if you've heard of CISA protected DNS, which used to be called Einstein, we are effectively the secure web gateway for the whole of the government, right? Mandated by US code to be the intrusion detection system. So whether you know it or not, as a government agency, you are already using Cloudflare on the civilian side for zero trust. Now, how you do that in your own space is if you can tie it to some initiative, some service that you're offering to the public, and we can improve not just the egress for your employees, but the ingress for how the experience is for your customer. That's usually the balance that we find ourselves. That's usually the area where we find customers most leaning towards Cloudflare.
Yeah. And the term that is used with your offering is cloud native. And I'm sure there's a lot of technical people can debate that back and forth. So what do you mean by cloud native?
Yeah. So it kind of goes back to, if we think about like the phases of the internet, not to go into a long history lesson here, but kind of when the internet was first, when the internet first came about, really the idea was just to democratize the ability to share information. And that meant the first iteration of apps was really, I'd say, like a copy and paste. You took like a physical magazine and you digitized it, or a book and you digitized it, right? It was really in kind of that second phase of when AWS and cloud computing came about, and then social media, and then, the iPhone and smartphones came about. That whole kind of cluster of technologies created what is generally in the industry referred to as digital native applications, right? And so a lot of what we use today is digital native. That third part is around internet native applications, right? And so what that means is that you have this disaggregated real-time need for decision making. If you think about the most kind of obvious scenario would be if you think about autonomous vehicles. Well, you need that decision to be made now, not 2 seconds after you cross that red light, right? And so how do you distribute this workload? Well, you have to minimize the latency. You can't break the laws of physics. And so if everything is hairpinning back to a bunch of central locations, that doesn't really work. And so the next generation of cloud really relies on you being as close and as local to the end user as possible. It requires that security posture to obviously be stronger than ever if we are going to be putting ourselves in positions where we're dependent on the technology without wanting to provide the level of oversight, right? Driving a vehicle without actually paying attention to the road requires a different level of security. And so when you bring this into the government, that this is the same type of scenario that we're looking at here, is like, how do you modernize these like services for the things that we don't know what's going to happen? AI obviously has been all the rage and the buzzwords, and it's really been around training that data set over the last few years. All these LLMs and all this generative AI, and now you got agentic, and okay, people are starting to take that trained data and do something with it. Well, so what's going to happen when people start using this data? That's generally referred in the industry as inference, right? And this is where this next generation of capabilities of where the internet is going becomes really critical, that it is highly distributed in real time.
One key player here is something called a human being. And there's these pesky human beings out there. And there's some people that say you can train 100 PhDs about, phishing resistance, and there's going to be 3 who are going to take the bait. And so it's not a matter of intelligence. It's just a matter of humans are just humans, and it's just the way some humans react. And so I think if there's any way that a company can, how do we say this, reduce the dependence of vigilance on these human beings, maybe that would be an assist. And so I think you work in that area as well, don't you?
Yeah, that's correct. So certainly around whether it's email, so in general, broader than just whether it's email security for phishing attacks, or whether it's connectivity, or whether it's some sort of application protections, whatever it is in kind of your digital modernization journey. I think that the key here boils down to IT is not simple. Everyone talks about like we need simplification. IT is not simple, and so the way that I like to kind of frame it is to say, we make complicated things less complicated, right? And so, you mentioned Cloudflare's been around for a while. When we first, our first foray into the space, we started gathering data to provide better performance and better security. And we said, okay, well, yes, how can we make this simpler? Because none of the concepts that Cloudflare is doing, or frankly, the last generation of modern companies was doing, is new. Nothing is new in the world, right? Everything is just slightly improved and simplified. And so we said, how can we take something like, if you remember back in the early days of the internet, everything was HTTP. Well, what made it hard to be HTTPS? Like, what made it hard to do certificates and encrypt that traffic? It's not technically complicated, but it's tedious, and it's a task that you might do once a year or once every however long your certificate is set for, and then you forget about it. And so these type of processes are things that were just difficult for the average consumer. And so what Cloudflare did actually a little over 10 years ago was said, we're going to make SSL certificates free for everybody. If you have a website, you put it on Cloudflare, we will ensure that you have an HTTPS connection. And most recently, actually just this week, we announced the same thing is available in your Zero Trust stack and in your public websites for post-quantum crypto. So how do you stay ahead of that without making the need for that end user to take this heavy action on changing a certificate or changing policy? If we can improve the security posture on the back end without the whoever's providing the service, the host of that service, having to take a major lift, that's an efficiency that the government can get behind. And that's a lot of what we're attempting to do here, is take things that the government is doing, maybe not their core competency, but they have to run it because of the nuance of government, and augment that to run at a larger scale.
Anish, I wanted to ask about the magic WAN. Sounds like a restaurant or something, but we don't have any time. There's so much going on here. I didn't realize that there's so much to learn about Cloudflare. Now, I think you folks have a learning center at your website, don't you?
Yeah, correct. So a lot of different areas that we can go to, and we can put this in the link. But there's 2 things. So there's a learning center. And so if you're a technical, developers.cloudflare.com would be a great spot for you to get all the details. And there's like tutorials and walkthroughs of how to configure things and set up. If you have a vanity site, your own personal hobby site, or just a johngilroy.com. I don't know if you have that, John. So I don't know if I just broadcasted somebody else's .com there. But if you have a website, just putting it behind Cloudflare automatically will get you basic security today and enhanced security, right? You can enable post-quantum crypto for your website for users that are using a browser that can leverage post-quantum crypto. You can have that level of communication today, right? Those are like little simple things that folks can do. we actually offer free services for anybody to use. And as I stated earlier, we don't charge you egress fees. And so your data is your data. And so if you decide that you want to use Cloudflare and then you decide it's not the right thing for you, it's just as easy to move off of Cloudflare as it is to move on. And again, that's in the interest of helping to build a better internet and letting you use what you deem best for your needs.
I'm taking notes, and you said, yeah, something real easy like quantum crypto. Yeah, it's like you go to this 7-Eleven, have a chat with someone about quantum encryption as you're walking out. It's a very complicated process, and I think you can make it easy. And I think one way to get more information is to go to the Learning Center. And if you're listening to this and you're walking your dog or something, you can go to federaltechpodcast.com and search 226, and I'll put a link to your Learning Center right there in the show notes, so it'd be awful easy to find. Yeah, post-quantum. I'll do that after breakfast tomorrow. Yeah, that's the next one. I tell you what, 6 months from now, I predict this, everyone's going to be dangling AI, this, but, the quantum stuff, that's the problem, man. I can see that coming. It's like a little train coming down, and everyone's worried about, I can deep fake, and Anish can summarize things quickly, and then the train nails you. The quantum's going to get you. I'm glad you thought about it, because people don't think about that at all. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Anish Patel, Head of Sales, Federal and Civilian at Cloudflare.